My mother let out a light, condescending chuckle as she leaned across the passenger seat, tapping her manicured fingers on the car window before the young sentry could even speak. She smiled with the easy pity of someone about to apologize for her daughter's unremarkable life, telling him not to mind me because I was just her +1, an ordinary desk clerk who had spent 23 years filing paperwork in a basement office. But when the guard took my credential, ran it through the security terminal, and watched the entire screen flash with red priority clearance flags, his face drained of color, he snapped to rigid attention, and he seized the emergency dispatch phone to announce that a flag officer was standing at the gate. For more than 2 decades, my mother Evelyn had maintained a very comfortable, very limited version of who I was. In her mind, the military was a fallback for someone who failed to climb a corporate ladder or marry a wealthy executive. Whenever her friends bragged about their children who were senior law partners or regional bank vice presidents, my mother offered a sympathetic sigh, telling anyone within earshot that her daughter Diana was still doing clerical work on base, quietly filing requisition forms that nobody ever read. She never asked about the years I spent deployed across the Arabian Sea, managing the logistical supply chain for an entire carrier strike group. She never asked why my phone calls home were often months apart, or why my voice sounded hoarse and exhausted when I checked in from secure communication bunkers. To Evelyn, my life had simply frozen on the day I put on my first uniform at 22. She took that early image of a junior officer behind an administrative desk and locked it away, never imagining the woman standing before her had outgrown it long ago. The morning we drove toward Naval Station Mayport, Evelyn spent the 40-minute trip adjusting her scarf in the visor mirror and talking endlessly about her neighbor's husband, Colonel Richard Vance. Richard was retiring after 30 years, and Evelyn had secured an invitation to the grand ceremony. She spoke about Richard as if he were a mythical hero, emphasizing every syllable of his rank while reminding me to pay close attention so I could finally see what real military success looked like. I kept my eyes on the highway, steering with one hand and nodding quietly. I had learned years ago that correcting my mother was useless. If I told her I spent the last 5 years commanding thousands of personnel and managing a multi-billion-dollar operational budget across 3 continents, she would have simply smiled, patted my knee, and asked if I was eating enough vegetables. Silence was easier. It was a shield that kept my private sacrifices safe from her superficial judgments. When we reached the security checkpoint, the line of vehicles moved with the measured pace of a high-security base on a major ceremonial day. The morning breeze carried the distant sound of a brass band tuning near the waterfront pavilion. Evelyn rolled down her window the instant our car stopped, thrusting her laminated visitor pass toward the guardhouse before the sentry could even raise a hand. The sentry, a sharp young petty officer with crisp creases in his uniform, took the pass with professional composure. He checked her name against the visitor log and politely asked for the driver's identification. That was when Evelyn offered her familiar patronizing grin, launching into an unsolicited explanation to ensure nobody mistook her for someone associated with mediocrity. She laughed and told the guard not to expect anything impressive from my card, adding that I was just escorting her because I worked in an administrative cubicle on the far side of the base. She remarked that after 23 years, some people simply settled behind a desk and never left. The guard did not smile. He reached through the window, took my gold-banded credential, and slotted it into the optical terminal scanner. For 3 seconds, nothing happened except the low hum of the scanner reading the embedded chip. Then 3 sharp authorization tones echoed against the concrete barrier. The digital screen illuminated in bright amber, displaying an executive clearance banner, followed immediately by a crimson alert that locked the civilian lane and activated VIP protocol. The petty officer's eyes widened, darting from the monitor to my face, and then down to the silver stars pinned discreetly to my blazer lapel. He did not look back at my mother. Every trace of casual routine vanished from his posture in an instant. He snapped his heels together, his spine stiffening into rigid attention as his right hand rose in a razor-sharp salute. With his left hand, he lifted the red dispatch receiver from the wall, announcing with urgent clarity that Gate 2 had a flag officer on site and requesting the officer of the deck immediately. Evelyn blinked in total bewilderment, leaning forward until her nose nearly touched the glass. She stared at the sentry, then turned to me with rising irritation, asking what kind of mistake he had made. She demanded to know if my paperwork had expired or if I had parked in an unauthorized zone, complaining that this young man was making a scene when we were already running late for Colonel Vance's processional. I kept my hands resting calmly on the steering wheel, offering only a faint smile. In less than 2 minutes, the heavy steel security door of the administration building opened. Commander Harris, the base provost marshal, strode across the tarmac at a brisk march, flanked by 2 armed security escorts in dress uniform. He walked straight to my window, executed a formal salute, and addressed me by my full rank, welcoming Rear Admiral Diana Shaw to the station and asking why headquarters had not been notified to prepare an escort. The color drained from my mother's face so fast it seemed the air had been pulled from the car. Her mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Her gaze darted between the thick gold braid on the commander's sleeve, the rigid salutes of the armed guards flanking our vehicle, and the calm, quiet posture of the daughter she had dismissed as an unimportant clerk for 20 years. I returned Commander Harris's salute and politely told him that honors were unnecessary today. I explained that I was attending purely as a personal guest of an old family friend, gesturing toward my mother, who sat frozen beside me. Commander Harris glanced at Evelyn with the deep deference reserved for family of senior flag officers, bowing his head respectfully and assuring her it was an honor to host Admiral Shaw's mother on base today. The security barriers lifted immediately. The sentry returned my badge with both hands, bowing his head as he wished me an outstanding morning. As I shifted the car into drive and rolled past the gatehouse onto the boulevard, leading toward the parade grounds, the silence inside the car was heavier than any reprimand could ever be. We drove for several minutes without a single word. Outside, naval ensigns whipped in the ocean breeze, and uniformed personnel on the sidewalks snapped to attention the moment they saw the official flag officer placard on our dashboard. Evelyn sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles pale, staring at the floor as if looking at me might shatter the world she had built. When she finally spoke, her voice was a trembling whisper. She asked how long I had been an admiral, her tone thick with disbelief and shame. She asked why I had never told her, why I had let her talk about filing cabinets and low-level office work at every family dinner, and why I had allowed her to look so foolish. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, speaking softly without anger. I told her that she had spent 20 years asking if I had found a husband, if my home was tidy, and if my little salary covered my groceries, but she had never once asked what I actually did when I boarded a naval warship. She had chosen a small, safe image of me that fit her comfort, and I had let her keep it, because real leadership needs no explanation to those who never truly listen. When we arrived at the VIP pavilion, Colonel Vance broke away from the receiving line, rushing across the lawn with open arms to salute and embrace me before the entire assembly of senior officers. Evelyn stood quietly behind me, watching every high-ranking commander step aside to show her daughter respect. For the first time in her life, she did not try to dominate the room. She stood quietly in the presence of what I had built, finally understanding that true strength never has to shout to be seen.